May 10, 1940. German forces launch Fall-Gelb, case yellow, the invasion of France and the Low Countries. The French army, considered the world's finest, stands ready with 3 million men, thousands of tanks, and the Maginot Line, the most formidable defensive fortifications ever constructed. Britain's expeditionary force of 390,000 men stands alongside them. Belgium and the Netherlands prepare to defend their neutrality. 6 weeks later, on June 22, France signs an armistice. The French army, supposedly invincible, has been utterly defeated. Over 360,000 French soldiers are dead, wounded, or captured. The British Expeditionary Force has evacuated from Dunkirk, abandoning all heavy equipment. Belgium and the Netherlands have surrendered. Paris has fallen without a fight. France, the nation that withstood 4 years of German assault in World War I, has collapsed in 43 days. The fall of France represents one of military history's most stunning reversals. It shocked the world. France was a great power, victor of World War I, possessor of Europe's largest army. How could it fall so quickly? The answer lies not in material inferiority. French forces were roughly equal to German forces in numbers and often superior in equipment, but in doctrine, leadership, and the revolutionary nature of German military thinking. This is the story of how Germany's Blitzkrieg shattered conventional military wisdom, how strategic surprise and operational excellence defeated numerical superiority, and how 6 weeks changed the course of World War II. The fall of France left Britain alone against Nazi Germany, drew the Soviet Union and United States deeper into the conflict, and demonstrated that modern warfare had fundamentally changed. 43 days that altered history forever. By spring 1940, Europe had endured 8 months of phony war, the period after Poland's conquest, when Britain and France had declared war on Germany, but no significant fighting occurred in the West. Both sides prepared. Germany trained and equipped its forces. France and Britain built up the British Expeditionary Force and prepared defenses. Everyone knew the storm was coming. The French strategic position appeared strong. The Maginot Line, a system of fortifications stretching along the German border from Switzerland to Belgium, was supposedly impregnable. The line featured concrete fortresses, underground barracks, artillery casemates, anti-tank obstacles, and overlapping fields of fire. France had invested enormous resources in this defensive system, convinced that it would prevent a repeat of World War I's German invasion through northeastern France. The Maginot Line had a critical gap. It didn't extend along the Belgian border. This wasn't an oversight but a political decision. Belgium was an ally. Extending fortifications along Belgium's border would offend Belgian neutrality and suggest France expected to abandon Belgium to invasion. Instead, French war plans called for advancing into Belgium when Germany attacked, meeting the Germans on Belgian soil rather than French territory. French military doctrine emphasized methodical, firepower-intensive operations. The French army was organized and trained for set-piece battles with extensive artillery preparation. Tanks were distributed among infantry divisions to support advances rather than concentrated in mobile armored divisions. Communications relied on telephone lines rather than radios. Decision-making was centralized, with corps and army commanders awaiting orders from high command rather than exercising initiative. The French army was numerically impressive, approximately 3 million men organized into 117 divisions, including 3 armored divisions. France possessed about 3,000 tanks, many superior to German tanks in armor and armament. The Char B-1 bis, France's heavy tank, was nearly invulnerable to German anti-tank weapons. French artillery was excellent. The army was well equipped by 1940 standards. The British Expeditionary Force, BEF, under General Lord Gort comprised 10 divisions, approximately 390,000 men, positioned along the Belgian border. The BEF was well trained and equipped but small compared to French forces. Britain's primary military effort focused on naval power and building an air force. The army remained a secondary concern. Belgium maintained 650,000 troops and the Netherlands 400,000, both committed to defending neutrality. Neither coordinated with France and Britain until actually invaded, complicating Allied planning. Both expected to hold German advances until Allied forces arrived. German forces appeared roughly equal in numbers, 141 divisions totaling about 3 million men. However, the Germans concentrated their armor, 439 tanks, in 10 panzer divisions designed for rapid, independent operations. These divisions combined tanks, motorized infantry, artillery, engineers, and communications in self-contained formations capable of sustained mobile operations. This organizational innovation would prove decisive. German air superiority was marked. The Luftwaffe fielded approximately 3,500 aircraft, including modern fighters, Bf-109, and dive bombers, Ju-87 Stuka. French and British air forces combined totaled about 2,000 aircraft, often obsolescent types. German aircraft were concentrated, coordinated with ground forces, and employed tactically to support the advancing army. Allied aircraft were dispersed, poorly coordinated, and often held in reserve. Most critically, German operational doctrine emphasized speed, surprise, and exploitation. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, combined armor, air power, and motorized infantry to break through enemy lines, then drive deep into rear areas, cutting communications, surrounding enemy forces, and creating chaos. This approach required decentralized command, with junior officers empowered to exploit opportunities without waiting for orders. German forces trained extensively in combined arms operations and rapid movement. The original German plan for invading France, Fall Gelb, was conventional, a major offensive through Belgium similar to the World War I Schlieffen plan. This plan was compromised in January 1940 when a German aircraft carrying operational documents crashed in Belgium. The Allies learned German intentions, allowing them to prepare defenses. This disaster prompted a fundamental rethinking. General Erich von Manstein proposed a radical alternative, Sichelschnitt, sickle cut. Rather than making the main effort through Belgium, where Allies expected it and would concentrate forces, Manstein suggested a surprise thrust through the Ardennes forest in southern Belgium and Luxembourg, crossing the Meuse River, then driving west to the English Channel. The Ardennes was considered impassable for armored forces, thickly forested, hilly terrain with few roads. French planning assumed at most light forces might emerge from the Ardennes, easily contained. Manstein proposed sending the main German armored force, 7 panzer divisions concentrated in Panzergruppe Kleist, through this impassable terrain, achieving complete strategic surprise. The plan was audacious and risky. If the panzers got stuck in the Ardennes, they'd be sitting ducks. If the French detected the concentration and responded effectively, disaster could result. If the Meuse crossings failed, the entire offensive would stall. But if it worked, German forces would cut the Allied armies in two, trapping the best Allied divisions, those advancing into Belgium, in a giant pocket. Hitler loved the plan. Over the objections of conservative generals, he approved Manstein's concept. The final German plan featured 3 army groups. Army Group B under General Fedor von Bock would invade the Netherlands and northern Belgium, attracting Allied attention and drawing Allied forces northward. Army Group A under General Gerd von Rundstedt, containing Panzergruppe Kleist with 7 panzer divisions, would drive through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse near Sedan, then race west to the Channel. Army Group C would demonstrate along the Maginot Line, pinning French forces there. The plan depended on speed, surprise, and Allied mistakes. If the Allies detected the Ardennes thrust and responded decisively, they might defeat it. Everything depended on reaching the Meuse quickly, crossing before French reserves arrived, then exploiting westward before the Allies could organize counterattacks. It was the riskiest operation in military history, and it worked perfectly. At 4:35 hours on May 10, 1940 German forces attacked. In the north, Army Group B invaded the Netherlands and Belgium. Paratroopers seized key bridges. Glider troops landed on Belgium's Fort Emael, Europe's most modern fortress, capturing it within 24 hours through surprise and innovative tactics. Panzer divisions drove into the Netherlands. The Dutch fought bravely but were overwhelmed. Rotterdam was bombed, killing hundreds of civilians. Queen Wilhelmina fled to London. On May 15, the Netherlands surrendered after 5 days. The Dutch campaign, though brief, served German purposes. It drew Allied attention northward. In Belgium, French and British forces executed their plan, advancing into Belgium to meet the German invasion. The French First Army and British Expeditionary Force moved to the Dial River line, meeting German Army Group B's advance. Initial engagements suggested the plan was working. Allied forces were blocking the Germans in Belgium. French High Command congratulated itself on executing the plan perfectly. They didn't realize they were walking into a trap. While Allied attention focused on Belgium, Panzergruppe Kleist, 7 panzer divisions comprising over 1,200 tanks, was driving through the Ardennes. The column stretched for 100 miles, vulnerable to air attack or ambush. But French reconnaissance aircraft spotted nothing significant. The reports were ignored or disbelieved. Allied intelligence assumed heavy armored forces couldn't traverse the Ardennes quickly. French cavalry units screening the Ardennes encountered German armored spearheads and fell back in confusion. Reports reaching French headquarters described German forces in the Ardennes but downplayed their significance. French commanders assumed these were diversionary attacks, nothing serious. The real battle was in Belgium, or so they thought. By May 12, German panzer divisions had traversed the Ardennes and reached the Meuse River at Sedan, Monthermé, and Dinant. They'd completed the impossible march through the forest in just 3 days. Now came the critical test, crossing the Meuse under fire against prepared French defenses. The Meuse River represented France's last natural barrier before the open terrain of northern France. French defenses along the Meuse were incomplete. The sector opposite Sedan was held by reserve divisions, poorly trained and equipped. French commanders didn't expect serious attacks here. The main battle was occurring in Belgium. May 13, 1940 became the campaign's decisive day. At Sedan, the German 1st, 2nd, and 10th Panzer Divisions prepared to cross the Meuse. Infantry would cross in rubber boats while artillery, and critically, the Luftwaffe provided support. At 1600 hours, hundreds of Stukas dive-bombed French positions. The psychological impact was devastating. The Stuka's siren created terror. The continuous bombing prevented French defenders from effectively engaging the crossing. German infantry crossed the Meuse in rubber boats, taking casualties but establishing footholds. Engineers worked frantically to build bridges for tanks. French artillery attempted to disrupt the crossings but was suppressed by German counter-battery fire and air attacks. By nightfall, German infantry held the west bank. Through the night, engineers completed bridges. On May 14, German tanks crossed the Meuse at Sedan. French counterattacks were disorganized, piecemeal, and easily repulsed. The French 55th Infantry Division, holding Sedan, collapsed. A gap opened in French defenses. German commanders recognized the opportunity. Rather than consolidating the bridgehead, they'd exploit immediately. Panzer divisions poured across the Meuse and turned west, driving into the gap. The exploitation phase of Blitzkrieg had begun. French High Command, still focused on Belgium and disbelieving reports from Sedan, responded slowly. Reserve divisions were ordered to counterattack, but they were days away. German panzers weren't waiting. They were racing west, 30-40 miles per day, cutting deep into the French rear. At Dinant and Monthermé, other German panzer divisions also crossed the Meuse, enlarging the breakthrough. The French defensive line along the Meuse had shattered. Within 48 hours, the strategic situation had reversed. Germany had achieved the breakthrough that French doctrine said was impossible with modern defenses. With the Meuse crossed and French defenses broken, German panzer divisions raced west across northern France. The objective was the English Channel coast near Abbeville, which would cut Allied forces in two, trapping the French First Army, British Expeditionary Force, and Belgian Army in Belgium and northern France, cut off from the rest of France. The exploitation was breathtaking in speed and audacity. Panzer divisions advanced 30-50 miles per day, far exceeding World War I's static warfare pace. They bypassed French strongpoints, leaving them for following infantry. Tank columns drove through the night, commanders navigating by compass, racing westward before French reserves could organize effective resistance. French high command struggled to understand what was happening. Reports described German tanks appearing in places they couldn't possibly be. Communications broke down, telephone lines were cut, radio equipment inadequate. French reserves, ordered to counterattack, found the situation changed by the time they arrived. German panzers were always ahead, always moving, impossible to pin down. On May 16, French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud called British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. "We have been defeated. We are beaten. We have lost the battle." Churchill flew to Paris. French commanders showed him maps with the situation, a 60-mile gap in French defenses, German armor pouring through. Churchill asked, "Where is the strategic reserve?" French Commander-in-Chief Maurice Gamelin replied, "There is none." This admission was devastating. France had committed all forces to the initial deployment, the advance into Belgium, and the defense of the Maginot Line. No strategic reserve existed to deal with the unexpected. German operational art had created a situation French planning hadn't anticipated, and France had no forces available to respond. French attempts to counterattack were local, poorly coordinated, and ineffective. The most significant was Colonel Charles de Gaulle's 4th Armored Division attack at Montcornet on May 17. De Gaulle's tanks briefly disrupted German supply lines but lacked infantry and air support. The attack was repulsed. This action would later contribute to de Gaulle's reputation, but it didn't affect the strategic situation. On May 20, German panzer divisions reached the English Channel at Abbeville. General Heinz Guderian's XIX Panzer Corps, having advanced 250 miles in 10 days, secured the coast. The Allies had been cut in two. In the north, 40 Allied divisions, the BEF, French First Army, Belgian Army, were trapped in a shrinking pocket with their backs to the sea. The Dunkirk evacuation, Operation Dynamo, became legend. The Miracle of Dunkirk saw 338,226 Allied troops rescued from the beaches under fire. But the evacuation was a disaster necessitated by France's collapse. The BEF abandoned all heavy equipment, tanks, artillery, vehicles, and fled across the Channel. The pocket situation was desperate. German forces attacked from the south, east, and west. Belgian forces, exhausted and overwhelmed, surrendered on May 28. The French First Army fought desperately to hold the perimeter while British forces evacuated. The Royal Navy and hundreds of civilian vessels, the little ships, ferried soldiers from Dunkirk's beaches and harbor to Britain. Hitler's infamous halt order on May 24 gave the Allies brief respite. For reasons still debated, Göring's promise that the Luftwaffe could destroy the pocket, concerns about tank losses, desire to preserve armor for the next phase, Hitler ordered the panzers to stop short of Dunkirk. This 48-hour pause allowed the Allies to strengthen defenses and begin evacuation. The Luftwaffe attempted to destroy the evacuation, bombing beaches and ships, but the RAF, fighting from British bases, contested the air, shooting down significant numbers of German aircraft. Weather sometimes grounded the Luftwaffe. The evacuation continued. By June 4, 338,226 troops had been evacuated, including 123,000 French soldiers. It was more than hoped for, but 40,000 French troops remained, fighting to the end before surrendering. The BEF had survived but left behind all heavy equipment. Britain was safe but nearly defenseless. The evacuation saved the men but lost the materiel. With the northern pocket eliminated, Germany turned south. Fall rot case red, the conquest of remaining France. French forces, having lost their best divisions in Belgium and at Dunkirk, numbered about 60 divisions facing over 100 German divisions. The odds were hopeless, but France fought on. The French established defensive lines along the Somme and Aisne rivers, the Weygand Line under new Commander-in-Chief Maxime Weygand. But these hasty defenses couldn't withstand German assault. On June 5, German forces attacked. French defenders fought bravely. Some units held for days against overwhelming odds, but couldn't stop the advance. Paris was declared an open city on June 10. German forces entered on June 14 without fighting. The French government fled to Bordeaux. The psychological impact was devastating. Paris, symbol of France, occupied without a shot. The French Republic was dissolving. Italy, sensing easy spoils, declared war on France on June 10. Italian forces attacked from the southeast but were repulsed by heavily outnumbered French defenders. This minor victory couldn't change the overall situation. France was finished. The French government debated whether to continue fighting. Some advocated withdrawing to North Africa, continuing the war from the empire. Others, including Marshal Philippe Pétain, hero of World War I and now Deputy Prime Minister, argued for armistice. On June 16, Prime Minister Reynaud resigned. Pétain formed a government and immediately sought armistice terms. The armistice was signed on June 22, 1940, in the same railway car where Germany had signed the 1918 armistice. Hitler insisted on this symbolic humiliation. Under armistice terms, Germany occupied northern and western France, including Paris and the Atlantic coast. Southern France would be governed by a French collaborationist regime based in Vichy under Pétain. The French fleet would be neutralized. The war for France was over. French casualties totaled approximately 360,000, 90,000 killed, 200,000 wounded, 1.9 million captured. Belgian casualties were 23,000. Dutch casualties were 10,000. British casualties totaled 68,000, 11,000 killed, 14,000 wounded, 41,000 captured. German casualties were lighter, 27,000 killed, 111,000 wounded, 18,000 missing, about 156,000 total. The casualty disparity reflects the nature of the campaign. German operational success minimized their losses. Rapid advances, encirclements, and enemy surrenders prevented prolonged attritional fighting. Allied forces, trapped in pockets, surrendered in mass once positions became hopeless. The Wehrmacht's victory was as much operational as material. Why did France fall so quickly? The reasons are complex but identifiable. Doctrine and organization. French military doctrine was defensive, methodical, and firepower-centric. It couldn't respond to fast-moving, decentralized German operations. French tanks were dispersed among infantry divisions, unable to concentrate for counterattacks. German Panzer divisions were self-contained, mobile formations designed for independent operations. Command and communications. French command was centralized, requiring orders from high headquarters for significant actions. Communications relied on telephone lines easily cut by advancing Germans. German command was decentralized, initiative encouraged at all levels. German forces used radios extensively, maintaining communications even during rapid advances. Air power. German air superiority was decisive. The Luftwaffe provided close air support, disrupted French movements, and prevented effective French air reconnaissance. Allied air forces were poorly coordinated, often held in reserve, and quickly overwhelmed. Strategic surprise. The Ardennes thrust achieved complete surprise. French planning assumed the Ardennes was impassable for armor. When German panzers emerged from the forest, French reserves were committed elsewhere, leaving no force available to contain the breakthrough. Leadership * French high command was elderly, cautious, and doctrinally rigid. Gamelin, 68, hadn't visited the front in years. Weygand, 73, replaced him too late. German commanders, Guderian, Rommel, Manstein, were younger, aggressive, willing to take risks and exploit opportunities. Morale and national will * the French nation, scarred by World War I's losses, lacked will for another devastating conflict. The phony war period created complacency. When disaster struck, defeatism spread rapidly. The government sought armistice rather than continuing the fight. German excellence. German operational art was superior. The combination of strategic surprise, operational speed, tactical excellence, and aggressive leadership created a military performance that French and British forces, though brave and well-equipped, couldn't match. The fall of France fundamentally altered World War II. Britain stood alone against Germany. Invasion seemed imminent. Operation Sea Lion was planned though never executed. The Battle of Britain would determine whether Britain survived. French defeat made the Soviet Union vulnerable. Hitler, having secured Western Europe, could focus eastward. Operation Barbarossa in 1940 became possible only after France fell. Stalin, terrified of Germany, appeased Hitler through the Nazi-Soviet pact, but French collapse demonstrated German military superiority and made eventual German-Soviet conflict more likely. The United States, still neutral, watched with alarm. French defeat showed isolationism was untenable. American military aid to Britain increased. The path toward eventual American entry became clearer. For France, defeat meant occupation, collaboration, and resistance. The Vichy regime collaborated with Germany. Charles de Gaulle, having fled to London, formed the Free French, insisting France continued fighting. The French resistance fought the occupation. France's soul was scarred. The debate over collaboration versus resistance remained sensitive. The fall of France demonstrated that modern warfare had changed. Static defenses like the Maginot Line were obsolete. Mobile warfare, combined arms, and air-ground coordination were the future. Military establishments worldwide studied the campaign, learning lessons about armor employment, communications, and operational art. Germany's victory in France wasn't inevitable. It resulted from superior operational art applied by a military that had studied, learned, and innovated between the wars. The Wehrmacht developed combined arms doctrine, concentrated armor into panzer divisions, trained relentlessly in mobile operations, and developed leaders comfortable with decentralized command. Blitzkrieg, though Germans didn't use this term, was revolutionary. It combined tanks, motorized infantry, artillery, engineers, and air support in coordinated formations designed for rapid, sustained advance. Rather than breaking through enemy lines to occupy territory, Blitzkrieg aimed to break through, then race deep into enemy rear areas, creating chaos and collapse. The psychological impact was as important as material destruction. French headquarters lost track of the situation. Communications broke down. Commands arrived obsolete. Units found themselves isolated. Civilians fled, clogging roads. The sense that the front had collapsed and disaster was inevitable spread faster than German tanks advanced. France's defeat validated German doctrine and emboldened Hitler. The Wehrmacht's reputation soared, seemingly invincible, capable of conquering any opponent. This success made subsequent disasters more tragic. Overconfidence led Germany to invade the Soviet Union, initiating the war it couldn't win. The fall of France remained stunning. In 6 weeks, Germany conquered a nation that had withstood 4 years of German assault in World War I. The French army, considered Europe's finest, was destroyed. The British army barely escaped. 2 allied nations surrendered. Paris fell. France, symbol of Western European civilization, lay defeated. The Battle of France demonstrated that numbers and equipment don't guarantee victory. Doctrine, leadership, and operational art matter more. France had more tanks, often better ones. French forces roughly matched German numbers, but France's military was organized, trained, and led for the wrong war. The methodical, firepower-intensive war of 1914–1918, not the mobile, rapid-tempo war Germany brought in 1940. We remember the fall of France for multiple reasons. It showed how quickly disaster can strike when enemies innovate beyond established doctrine. It demonstrated the importance of leadership, morale, and national will in determining military outcomes. It altered World War II's course, leaving Britain alone, making Operation Barbarossa possible, and drawing the United States toward intervention. Most fundamentally, the fall of France reminds us that past success doesn't guarantee future victory. France had won World War I, constructed the Maginot Line, and built a large army. But by preparing to fight the last war, France lost the next one. The lesson applies beyond military history. Institutions, nations, and individuals must adapt to changed circumstances or face the consequences. 43 days in spring 1940 changed the world. The French Republic fell. Nazi Germany dominated Europe. The path toward total war, toward Barbarossa, Pearl Harbor, and eventually Allied victory, began in the defeat suffered in the fields of France, where the Blitzkrieg proved that warfare had fundamentally changed, and those who failed to adapt would pay the price.